So we've got a great panel lined up. So I'm going to just flip over to the next slide. Um, so one thing I'd like to encourage as we start off is please feel free to chime in, chat, and we might call on you here and there. So we know a lot of the people that are joining. So we've had over 105 people registered. So we're excited to have people from really from government, from venture, as well as from a lot of facilitators in the market and companies as well. So we've got a great panel lined up, as we mentioned. Ben McMartin is, so why don't we just go ahead and we'll put everybody on camera for a second, and then I'll go back to these slides. So we've got a great panel here, and Ben is going to be leading the way. I told him to kind of keep things calm here between all of us. So he'll go ahead and start the intros and everything when we kick in. I'm just going to take 10 minutes on the agenda to just go over some of the data. So I don't want to take up too much time, and we can bring up other things during the discussion if needed. But I'm going to go ahead and start off with that, and then will lead into the discussion around, what solutions are out there, and more than just barriers. So I'll let have Ben lead that. So with that, yeah, chime in, tell us where you're coming in from, and what you're doing and why you're here. So with that, let me just go ahead and bring these slides back up. So like we mentioned, we've got a great panel and nobody that's shy here. So I'm going to be just sitting back and relaxing and just have my popcorn ready to jump in. So as we do that, let me just tell you very quickly, 30 seconds, Public Spend Forum. We're a market intelligence and supply chain intelligence platform. We are helping public sector innovation teams, buyers, and investors really get deep insights into what's happening in emerging tech markets with a public sector viewpoint. So the key three things that we're really helping with are help understand what are emerging trends and capabilities out there in the market. What does the ecosystem of companies as well as labs, investors, others look like? And then how can you qualify which companies are ready to commercialize? What are the potential risks, et cetera? So go deeper. And we can talk more about how we work with clients, but essentially we have rapid sprints that we can execute in a week. We just introduced a subscription that you can subscribe to, and we also have advisory. So with that, let me just jump into the data. I'm going to rush through it. So I know Ben is going to be watching the clock here. So I want to make sure I stay on time and give our panel, because that's where lots of good discussion is going to happen. So when we think about all the data gathering we're doing and the analysis we're doing on a regular basis, we started with the basis saying, what are the use cases? What are people looking for, right? So as I mentioned, there are three types of use cases. Understanding trends in the market. What is the ecosystem? And then how do we ultimately accelerate and address problems, right? And accelerate outcomes and address the big challenges that we all hear about. So our goal as we're doing some of this analysis is, one, provide full visibility, right? That's the starting point. If you don't know who you're working with, and that's what we're going to be talking about, some of the data we'll look at, we can't really solve problems. So that's the very first thing we said is, how do you provide comprehensive visibility, whether it's companies you're working with already, governments working with, the broader market, what's happening in the market, right? And number two is more critical insights. Which companies are ready to commercialize? What are kinds of use cases that are being addressed? So that's what you see in these boxes in the middle. I'm just going to skip that. You can see what it says, but really understanding what are the use cases, ecosystem, and where is the activity happening. So with that, when we started looking at all the markets and all the priorities out there, one thing we saw was that there's no standardization around the emerging tech categories. So we took it upon ourselves to create 13 categories, everything from what's addressed in the CHIPS Act to defense priorities to NSTC. There's no standard. So now we've actually had these discussions with NSF and everyone else, and we're actually helping on some of these fronts, helping everyone standardize. We've met with the CHIPS team, we've met with the NSF team, and so this is how we've defined these categories, 13, but you'll see a version 2.0 coming out soon as well. So then I want to get to kind of the portfolio. Then we're basically building ecosystem maps. And that means looking at everyone who's in the ecosystem, from companies to research institutions to private capital, who are the investors, to what kind of resources are available in the ecosystem, right? And then starting to do more deeper analysis with that. So that takes me to, voila, here it is, the slide on spending. So we're continually updating our analysis, but what I wanted to first start with is just give you a sense of, what's happening in the market. So what we've done is we've taken all the spending data first from a government standpoint and said, okay, what could be classified as R&D? Okay. And we can talk about what that definition is, and we have confirmed that with a number of people. So we're always constantly seeking input on that. So what you generally see is, one thing I just want to point out in this trend chart, it's by these 13 categories. Biotech is not here because biotech is so big. It's over $100 billion. So it messes up the chart a little bit, so we took it off. Okay, so if you keep biotech off, what you see is the general trend, one, overall, all the categories generally are increasing. We do have a chart that shows which ones are increasing more, which, for instance, space, microelectronics, clean tech, and you can kind of see that in each one of these sections here, for instance. So this is comprised of everything from grants to SIBRs. SIBRs, I know we talk a lot about, many of the people here. It's actually a very small portion if you look at it overall in terms of total spending. Grants actually makes up a massive, massive chunk in R&D. And then, of course, you have production contracts, et cetera. OTAs. I know Ben is a super expert on this, and he can tell you all about OTAs. That's becoming a bigger and bigger chunk. So those are the components that make up. And then you can see the chart over here in terms of what are the biggest categories. Energy, because of some of the new bills that have been passed. A lot more spending in electronic warfare, you see, definitely in communication. But then some of the other categories moving up. Space definitely moving up. Microelectronics, as I mentioned. A lot of investment in robotics and advanced manufacturing. It looks small here, but it's actually moving up pretty fast. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to move through these quick. So next is, I'm not going to touch on this slide too much, but just say that it's really important to understand, where's this money going besides saying it's going in these categories, right? What are we investing in? At a very detailed level, that's what, if we don't have that deep visibility, we can't make good decisions, right? So what you see here is we're trying to understand what are the use cases that are most prominent, right? What problems are we addressing? For instance, in aerospace defense, aircraft parts manufacturing and assembly, that makes sense from Air Force and some of the systems that we have in place right now and programs, right? But then what are the tech? What's the technology that's being used? So we have a number of charts on this, but that's really important. So then who are the companies? So I just want to give you a sense, because that's going to be the big part of the discussion that Ben is going to facilitate. So in terms of what we see in the portfolio right now, the crux of, so the topic of today's discussion is, how do we increase the portfolio, right? Strengthen it. And we intentionally use the term strengthen instead of increase, because strengthen may have different meanings. So is it just about numbers, right? Or is it really about, how do we help companies that come in scale and be successful? I think ultimately that's what we are all talking about. So just a couple of numbers to give you a start. Per our analysis over the past 6 years, the 23 analysis is still ongoing. But so far, what we've accounted for is 68,000 unique companies that have come in. Now, some of these have exited over time as well. So that's one thing we're trying to understand, how many are exits and entries. Year over year, that we've seen a growth as the spending, of course, has increased from in emerging tech, from 25,000 companies that we saw, unique companies in 18, to over 36,000 in 22. And we see that number growing slightly in 23 as well. So that's, you can think of that as unique number of companies that are getting contracts in some way related to R&D. Now, that's not everything. And two, some of these companies, they want a SBIR, they want a grant, and then they leave. We want to start, and we expect some of that, right? There's a lot of experimentation from an R&D standpoint, but how do we make sure more of them succeed? So I just want to give you some more charts on this. So what you see with these numbers, by the way, is what we believe to be the full portfolio of emerging tech companies that have already in some way contracted with the government. So next questions are then, okay, how are they doing? So we're still getting deeper into that. This is just another visibility view of from a standpoint of minority companies. And across categories, are we increasing what's the percentage of companies that are minority and underserved? And we can talk about what the definition is, but you can see, for instance, and I posted this chart on LinkedIn, and I know Jason Ratchey shared this chart. This shows that the Air Force has the highest percentage in terms of underserved and minority companies that are within emerging tech coming into the market, right? And then you see NSF has a lot of green here as well, and then Department of Commerce. So again, gaining visibility into saying, okay, what types of companies are coming in? This is another visibility view. How many dual use companies are coming in? So this is just one example. We have this across every category. So robotics, automation, advanced manufacturing, this is just showing you 25, but we have seen now over from about 2,200 in advanced manufacturing, about 200 plus companies that are dual use. And we're still kind of going through that in terms of when we define dual use, by the way, we're also taking into account that they're getting investment money. So we're not just saying, are they working with commercial customers and government? We've added a third component to that definition. Are they getting investment capital? Now, that's not always necessary, so we can debate that. But then beyond government portfolio, how many other companies are there, for instance, in advanced manufacturing? Do we, in addition to the ones that we already have in the market that we've worked with, there are 50,000 plus companies. Now, the question I think we need to ask here is, how many do we need to attract, right? Should we first focus on the ones that we've already attracted and work with and make them successful before we keep thinking about how do we bring in more, right? I think that's a really, really important question, right? If we just keep focusing on how do we attract more startups, but we forget about the ones that just already came in, then we're not really helping accelerate towards the end outcomes. And then last couple points here. Then we're looking at the progression, right? That goes to the second goal we have. This is just an example of SBIR companies. So through 2022, we have about 10,500 companies that came through the SBIR program in over 5 years. So about 5,000 with phase one. According to our analysis, about 1,100 had only phase two, and both phase one and phase two, so they moved from phase one to two, about 4,500. Now, we can get deeper into these numbers and how we computed them, but it's fairly simple. But again, we're seeing, how many of these companies then move to phase three or production contracts in some way, right? Are they being successful? So we have those numbers as well we can talk about. And this is the last chart I'm going to share, and then I'm going to hand it over, is we're building a commercialization model that says, okay, how many companies are actually ready to commercialize? And so this is based on that. So what we found in the microelectronics portfolio based on our modeling is many of the companies are very early stage. So a lot of R&D, early stage, TRL level 1 to maybe 5, 6. But this criteria actually includes a lot of other criteria, such as, do they have commercial customers? Are they doing production already, right? So out of the microelectronics portfolio, we found about a 111 out of 2,100 companies or so that we felt merit further due diligence for commercialization. So you see a lot of the companies being early stage. So how do we progress those? So those are types of questions that, as we talk about strengthening the portfolio, that we're pondering, and we'd love to hear from you. What are other types of things that questions that we need to be asking? So with that, this is just showing more data on some of those companies ready for commercialization. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Ben to start the discussion and maybe some of these charts. And I know he's got a set of things lined up. So Ben, take it away.
All right, thanks, Raj. Appreciate it. And I mean, those data points are fascinating, and they'll definitely come up during this conversation. Um, the question of the percentage of R&D spend out of the total budget, how much is that split between different programs? What are the contracting approaches for it? What are the tech areas that are being bought on it? And then ultimately, is enough money being pumped into the critical areas to actually transition them, or are we just spreading it out and going with the shotgun approach? No one's answered that question, which is why we're having discussions like this with really smart people. And so I'm excited by the folks that join us today. And so we got three superstars here today that will lead the discussion. I will throw the grenade in, and then they'll see what happens after that. But ultimately, I have Jesse Levin joining us today. Jesse is currently the executive director of the Defense Entrepreneurs Forum. If you are in the defense industry, especially in the emerging tech sector for defense technology, and you don't know who Defense Entrepreneurs Forum is yet, you may want to go find out. Defense Entrepreneurs Forum kind of made its name as a very flat organization where you had the likes of Hondo Gertz or Will Roper, along with the practitioners at the level where you kind of have this flat discussion about these type of topics. Very cool organization. Jesse is also the owner of Tactivate, where he does, I don't know, normal stuff like go hang out in Ukraine for the last 2 years. Tactivate actually does first response in zones like currently in Ukraine. They've been there since February 2022. And ultimately, they do disaster response. They're working with folks on the ground. This is not the first crazy zone Jesse has been in since I've known him. So I'm very interested in hearing some more on that as well. We're joined by Trish Martinelli. Trish Martinelli, I met her previously when she's working for the National Security Innovation Network. Some of you may know that group falls under the Defense Innovation Unit. Prior to that, it didn't fall under the Defense Innovation Unit, and way back it was called MD5. So you got to go way back on this organization. But ultimately, Trish is now with the Office of Small Business Programs for DoD, correct, Trish? DoD Small Business Programs. And so, I mean, what a better person to talk about how are we doing with engaging small business, right? Ensign with their outreach activities, and then into OSD, Office of Small Business Programs now. And then I have John Ferry here, former Army Special Forces, he worked the DARPA to SOCOM mission, currently doing really cool stuff. How about builders of ActBot, which is a generative AI platform that DoD is using for its acquisition process. In his spare time, I don't know, he also created userogue.com, which solves the other side of the equation, the proposal equation. And John, you can find John involved in all of these things. So we're really going to get into the weeds on the cool stuff that they're doing as well. But that's my summary, but I'd kind of like to give you guys an opportunity. Oh, Raj wants to jump in.
Ben, I had to interrupt because I didn't do a proper introduction for you. So I just wanted to just say really quick, I've felt honored to work with Ben for a long time. He was at Public Spend Forum. He's still an advisor, and now he started this awesome firm, Enlighten, and he is the expert on acquisition innovation and OTAs. So thank you, Ben, for facilitating here, and always exciting to work. So and he's got a book coming out soon, so I know I'm excited to join that party and get many autographs. So
things I don't want to talk about, Raj. Give me my time back from a panel. All right, so thank you, Raj, for that. So let's get right into it because I gave a little intro, but there's more to you guys than what I can say in a couple seconds on the intro. Raj showed those charts about all these different companies, research institutions, experts, venture capital, private equity. There's a lot of people in the ecosystem, and there's a lot of different ways you can serve in the ecosystem and be part of it. So I'm really interested in how you would define your own role in the defense space currently. Why don't we kick it off with John? You got 1 million jobs. What's your current role in the defense space?
I got 5 kids too, so I don't do a lot of sleeping. Yeah, so I don't know. I did a lot of time with DARPA, saw a lot of like the practical and impractical uses of AI. Just happened to be in this space. Been running GovCon for like 5 years, so I think the perspective I bring is I've been on the government side of the acquisition technology and logistics ecosystem, right? Trying to bring new tech into government. And interestingly, like transitioning technology out of DARPA, NRL, AFRL, insert the research lab across FedCiv or DoD, very similar to trying to get a new tech startup technology into the same acquisition process, right? You're not the only one living on the wrong side of the valley of death. So been on the government side, been on the industry side. I've got this weird mix of, been an operator, been in the Pentagon building palms, right? Like, but I also have an idea of like how arduous and ugly this process is on both sides of the fence, and I have a pretty decent understanding of the technologies and where they can be applied. And I just have a candid take on like, sorry, if you're trying to bring tech into DoD and government in general, it's hard. I'll tell you how hard it is. I'm not gonna hide the ball. It's bad. But we all do it. Government spends almost $1 trillion a year. Somehow people are doing it. No reason why you can't do it too. So I think just having those kind of candid conversations and being very open with folks is the way, from a human-centered perspective, we're going to start kind of eating this elephant.
That's a great perspective. I for certain in my time when I've been coaching teams either on the government side or on the industry side for instituting different models, trying different acquisition approaches, I've always said this is going to be hard and painful, and you're going to work your way through it, and it'll be worthwhile because it's challenging. But if you're looking for it to be easy, you're in the wrong business because it's not going to be easy. That's the one thing it's not going to be, right? It's going to be challenging, right? Opportunity to excel.
I mean, there are a few places in industry where like I don't think there's more regulation anywhere. I haven't really done the page count, but like take 5,000 pages of the FAR and then add in another 3 to 5,000 pages of DFARs, and that's just starting out. So yeah, it's there.
All right, Jesse, let's kick it off to you. So you have a unique role. You're wearing a couple hats. By the way, I love this frozen picture we have of Jesse, so I hope he can hear us. I'm screenshotting it right now. It's amazing. Jesse, if you're there, jump on in. I know you're on the hotel internet. And he dropped. All right, so we're going right to Trish, and then we'll come back to Jesse. Trish,
Yeah.
same. Oh, Jesse's back. Jesse,
Jeremy,
you got the deaf hat. You got the Tactivate hat. You're all over the place. Oh, no comms. No comms for Jesse. You got to start staying at the Hilton, not at the roadside. All right, let's go over to Trish. Trish, same question. Jump in.
I'll call back in 1 second.
Okay, I'll tap
Sorry, guys.
dance for a little while until
Yeah.
my friend Jesse comes back. It's great to see how much of the Defense Entrepreneur Forum DNA is flowing through this conversation. I want to say up front because of things you'll understand. I am not a government employee. I don't speak on behalf of the US government. I'm just Trish, who has been bureaucracy busting around the Pentagon for coming up on 20 years. So So in terms of what we're doing, I love what Katie Tobin wrote a couple of years ago when she wrote an article about how the Great British Bake Off explains innovation. And what you've just said, both John and Ben, in our discussion so far, in that this will be rewarding, but it will not be simple. Right. So if we go to the Michelin star rated restaurants in DC, we walk in, we have this amazing meal, and it's not because somebody just like, showed up 12 minutes before the shift and pulled out a couple knives, right? This is years and years of expertise and knowing what works and what doesn't, often by trying things that you thought would work but fail. So, especially in my role, industry engagement with small business, I want to help people successfully navigate what can be barriers. But it's not a roadmap to Christmas morning where there's just a gift waiting, and if you just hit all the waypoints, you get a present, which is a huge
Wait a
fat.
minute. What? What? Everybody gets a perfect
No,
record,
no,
right?
not everybody
the
gets a
hell?
prize in this one. It is still our system of capitalism and competition and understanding the market. So product market fit is king or queen, depending on how you want to look at it. And if when you understand the need and you really successfully design a solution and you get all the things in alignment, whether it's in the commercial market or in the federal space, you make some magic happen. But it's not a guaranteed gift. It is still a business that you have to work at. What I love about what we're doing at the Office of Small Business Programs is taking some of those burdens off that we as a DoD bureaucracy have laden on, one of which I'd like to share up front, which is our Project Spectrum. It's at projectspectrum.io, which helps small business self-certify in CMMC compliance, which, as Ben McMartin will tell you, is now an ironclad requirement in all contracts at the DoD. But we're going to help you do that at no cost. And we're also assign a cyber advisor for you to come back to with further questions as those CMMC requirements advance and change. And that's a gift. So I'll turn it back over to you.
I mean, that's pretty outstanding. So when I was on the other side, when CMMC was just but an idea, and I was on one of the early task forces for that thing, I sat in on one of the most preposterous meetings that's ever happened, in which DoD and the Professional Services Council held a how are we going to do this CMMC accreditation board meeting. And DoD came in and said, CMMC, it's a thing, figure it out. And then they just left. And everybody in the room was stunned. We were like, all right, so we're setting up the board. How's this going to work? So those were the really early days when I thought for sure this thing would die. And here we are. It's still alive somehow. I will throw in a little plug for the state of Michigan since you threw in your plug. The state of Michigan, for companies in Michigan, has a sponsorship, as a lot of states do, in which they will subsidize that and they will help you with your CMC or your NIST, 800, 171. So make sure you check your local state as well and see if they have any resources to help you out with that. But obviously that's a burden for all business, right? Small business for sure, but all business. There's a lot of burdens in government, and you kind of got to make a decision on whether you want to go for it. So let's transition that right into the next thing I'm thinking about, which is I like to go to success first, and you already dropped one success on me. I love that. But let's go back to John and talk about when it comes to attracting. The question is usually when it comes to attracting startups and emerging companies or emerging technologies. But what we heard from Raj in the data in the forefront, which is we can track a lot of data, but are we just getting a bunch of technologies and none of it fits a mission, which is what Trish brought up, right? Product mission fit or product market fit. Do you see anything good that's going on to attract the right technologies into government.
So you took my thunder away. I can tell you all the bad things that are happening. So what I'll say at the macro level, there is a hunger and a thirst for new technology, right? Which is kind of the premise, this sort of first starting point of like, if you're in a sort of legacy war where folks are happy with what they got, they're not even going to be looking at you, right? So there is kind of, and we've seen this particularly in the DoD space, right? We've seen this kind of slowly ramp up over, say, the last 10 years. You can kind of track when Ash Carter established DIUX and the kind of evolution from that point on. There's been a little bit of a swing, and obviously the VC markets where people are really, the venture capital space are really intent on getting into the DoD space, right? Which has really accelerated the number of companies that are now responding to that expressed interest. So that's super interesting, right? That's some response. And I was at DARPA back when DIUX got founded, and there were folks actively talking about like, hey, DoD doesn't give us the time, or Silicon Valley doesn't give us the time of day. Google pulled out of Project Maven very famously for various reasons. Wasn't a good look. That pendulum has swung, and now, interestingly, we've got VCs complaining that their portcos aren't getting enough government contracts. And here's my hot take on that front. And this goes to a little bit of what Trish was saying. This game has not changed, right? The game has been the game since McNamara or since The Last Supper, wherever you want to snap the chalk line. The game has been the game for at least 20 years now, right? It really hasn't changed. We've switched from 1 year to 2 year budgets and then back again. Kind of the last time it was really a big thing. We can talk about middle tier acquisition, varying levels of success. We can talk about OTA authorities and how now basically everybody has them, and folks are slowly coming to the realization that you can do production OTAs a la Microsoft. But here's the thing. It's really easy to blame the government for being slow to buy stuff. But to Trish's point, the government has been the same. They bought the stuff the same way for a really, really long time. If you're looking for product market fit, it's not different. This is just sales. We have a different way of talking about it, but it's all just sales. If you're not investing in your sales team, if you're not teaching your sales team how to do sales and taking sales seriously in GovCon, I don't care how many advisors, former GoFo SESs, or trips to the hill you make, you're gonna fail. Because that first slug of cash you got from the SIBR program, that second slug of cash you got from a congressional score, if you're not in a POR with an O&M tail, you're not going to have sustained revenue, right? So that might work for a quick pump, and oh, look, my valuation went really high, and now I'm a dead unicorn. And that's the issue that I think we need to also start talking about. Is there's some inflated expectations, and we're starting to see some realization of reality. But the downside that's going to happen is once the VCs lose interest because they didn't get the returns they wanted, that comported with, what you get on the West Coast, they're not going to come back for another 10 years. It's going to be a VC winter in dev tech and in public sector spending in general. So I think it's really valuable that we're having these conversations now. I think we have to be really, really blunt about it. And every party in the ecosystem needs to start claiming responsibility for their due, and the government is not the only responsible party.
Yeah, great points. Jesse, you're back.
I am back. Sorry, guys.
Now you're man on the street. So let's circle back to you, but then I want to go back to John's point, because I want to talk about this concept of everybody gets a program of record, which is detrimental to folks who want to get into this market to have that being thrown around. And it does get thrown around. Going back to your role, you got a couple different hats on. What's your current role in the defense ecosystem?
I think DEF's always played it's been a great kind of unifier. It's this informal ad hoc kind of guerrilla organization, doesn't really compete with anyone or any other program. And as we've all kind of attested to, the kind of overall innovation ecosystem within DOA has really kind of matured in a lot of ways. And Ben, you were talking about J. Adam Harris, MD5, like the old school days. We've come far. There's been a lot of tools, implemented since then, but I would, personally, I'm still a huge proponent for the criticality of informal networks, who connections. Like anything else, this is very much a game of, what kind of top cover do you have, what kind of tie-in do you have, and whether you're chasing, SIBRs or OTAs, or you're really interested in what John was just talking about. In sales, I would equate to, like, are you out in the field talking to the guys doing the work, guys and gals doing the work, and getting that real-time input. I think there's still a lot that needs to be done, and the ecosystem is changing drastically. I can speak to Ukraine. I think the dynamics really changed. We look at things like the Afghan evac, the people and organizations that are getting involved, and how they participate in what traditional organizations would typically be doing. More traditional DoD or logistical support or procurement apparatuses would particularly be doing, are now being conducted by far more informal groups. So I think DEF's role, as it were, is just to kind of keep tabs on the ecosystem and to try to keep feelers out, because not all these individuals in these small groups and universities or otherwise are going to even understand what a SIBR is, or understand what the ecosystem looks like. And they're doing great work, and they want to serve and they want to help, but they have no idea where to start. And DEF, for whatever reason, has a pulse on that and is able to kind of connect, more wild and crazy ideas, or folks out there on the edge doing things, and to plug them in, to connect them with the Bens of the world, to connect them with the Ensigns and the DIUs of the world. So, that's really what we're after. And we're really kind of pushing for helping DoD writ large understand, celebrate, and empower informal networks, and to celebrate the fact that things are being done very differently, and that while we have these tools and the system has really matured nicely, our AOs have drastically changed, and our the threat environment has drastically changed, and we now have to look at a very different way of doing things.
Yeah, those are great points. In 2012 through maybe 2020, a lot of push on OTAs, a lot of push for prototyping efforts, right? So that was my experience in Army acquisition. Was we're going to do a lot of experimentation, but they're going to be prototypes. So it's not going to be like John's work at DARPA, right? We're gonna take some little bets, right? Like, we know this thing is going to go into a system. We'll do some prototyping, so safe bets, right? At the same time, the Air Force comes through and it says, hey, we're not getting much out of the SIBR program we're doing. We do a bunch of studies, and then people fall off. What if we skip that phase one? We start going to phase two. What if we start using SIBR as more of a discretionary fund to try different things, as opposed to, this shouldn't be a secret to anybody. How did people used to use SIBR? To supplement their program budget, right? Hey, I ran out of money. Oh, steal some SIBR money and do a SIBR on the same thing that you're developing. I mean, that's how it was used. So when Air Force comes in and they're like, you know what, we're not going to use it that way. We're going to use that as a discretionary fund, which discretionary funds don't exist, right? This is the funding conundrum that we have. And so ultimately we get into this piece, and we had the Raider fund. We've tried all these different kinds of funds, but ultimately companies are coming in and saying, I have a brand new idea. I got a white paper. You're not thinking about it. And if you have some money, I'll do this research with you. And the answer from the customer is usually, I don't have any money. I budgeted for that 2 years ago. Where were you 2 years ago? So then the messaging I started to hear several years ago and to today was, oh, you know how you get into the defense space? You do SIBR, you do OTA, and then you get a program of record. And then you've got some company who's doing one tiny piece of some software solution they came up, and their dream is SIBR, OTA, program of record. You know how many programs of record there are? So this messaging is detrimental to companies because they get bummed out. Hey, I told my investors that when I was done with these two things, I was going to get $100 million contract for somebody, right? You're not building a system, you're building one piece of it. So
if I can add to that real quick.
Yeah, will you jump in on that, John?
Just to add on that, Ben, if you look at, like, I think it's also important for folks to be transparent about wins and losses, right? Because there's this false sense that, oh, we jump in, we got a D2P2 converted to a phase $300 million contract, bam! And that's all you see in the information space right now. That's all that's popping up on LinkedIn. That's what everyone's getting. And there's this like parlayed relevancy spin where, like, I mean, Air Force is doing a fantastic job leveraging the authorities and the money they have. It's amazing, right? They're doing a phenomenal job of moving tech into their their operators' hands. But they are also amplifying those wins because they're wins for them. So the messaging that these new and prospective entrants into the defense market are seeing is you can do, phase 1 to phase 2 sequential, pop into a phase 3, maybe get some supplemental. VCs are now asking/demanding for cyber money before they jump in on a deal on a fund round. And you've got these founders who don't know what they're necessarily doing, but they, as far as they understand it, everything they're seeing, all the research that they're doing, all the information they're getting back from the government is, hey, yeah, the light is at the end of the tunnel. Once you skip a few 24 months later, they're shutting down shop. And we're
Yeah.
wondering why the defense industrial base is shrinking 30% a year.
And we're not helping them out at all by counting the funds cap base as part of the overall earnings when we're looking at SIBRs, right? So like if I've just invented the invisibility cloak and I've got some venture funding, and now I come to the Defense Department for SIBR money, the cap table of the VC that I'm working with can make or break me there in terms of qualifying still for SIBR. So, hi, we're not helping ourselves out there. I do want to talk a little bit about venture money and government interests, right? And alignment of incentives. So Jason Rathke is the perfect person to balance these two almost inconceivable notions, because what does venture want? Venture wants a 10x return within a small amount of time. That's the incentive. I'm oversimplifying, but that's the incentive structure. What does the Defense Department want in terms of incentive when they're bringing in new tech? They want control and specificity. They don't really care if you're profitable. They don't really care if it takes 47 years. Well, maybe 47 is an exaggeration, but their timeline will go way out to get what they need if they can just like refine and define every little nitnoid of it. So those are two competing, it's a misalignment of incentives between venture and between Defense Department R&D development. So that's going to be really interesting to see how we can balance that. Can we convince the DoD to give up more control to get companies to a profitable status? Can we convince venture to still invest in things that might have a smaller bang, but for a longer period of time? So Jason's the guy for that, and hats off to him for it. But one of the things that I think is also really important, and I can't believe they pay me for the work that I do now because I love it so much, is to see like small innovators start small companies. And what I hope from this point forward is that bureaucracy busting, like what we're doing at the Office of Small Business Programs, will be an early stage partner with those small companies and innovators. I don't want you to perfect your technology to the point where you think you have this irresistible thing for the Defense Department and then find out that the slog to get through the bureaucracy is not something you're willing to do. That's not right. That we need to set up our innovators for better success.
So, Jesse, with your company, now you do more work with, I feel like you do more work with like Homeland Security and disaster response, but give us a little bit of background on Tactivate on where you fit in.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of work we do is like rapid mapping of human and organizational terrain in vulnerable areas, emergent crisis. So Philippines, the Hades, the Ukraines of the world. And one thing, to be the squeaky wheel in the room, I think, we have like incredible resources of folks who've come up through the system, and people like Trish in these seats to really help these small companies, navigate the process, right? But what I also want to put out there is that we over systematize and overthink things a lot of ways. And that's a huge issue for, I think, the DoD in regards to the environments that we're currently operating in. So not, one thing that Tactivate we'll look at is, we'll jump up and down and say, hey, look, we're operating in Ukraine, not for any kind of political reasons or even a cause, for the cause per se, but because it's important we study how this idea of whole of society works, right? We look at China, we look at Russia, we look at Ukraine, and the entire civilian populace has been involved in what we would typically call like procurement, innovation, the feedback loops from frontline units to these entrepreneurs sitting in basements in colleges and otherwise is immediate, right? There's a frontline need, the tech or the need gets pushed back. These kids are coding and we're iterating and fielding in 24 hours. There's nothing to do with OTAs, nothing to do with SIBRs, nothing to do with RFI. It's just happening. And it's happening because there's so many people involved in so many ways for them to, to contribute, that there's no bureaucracy, and that's out of necessity, right? I'm not saying that that is the answer with the capital T, but I would like to put it to this group. Like, what are we going to do when, the system is really slowing down? We're there's all of these processes, which is much, much better than it was. And there's a lot of resources, which are far better than they were, but we are getting ourselves in, and we are currently facing some serious challenges with some near, not so much peers anymore, that are going to require far more of the industrial base, the entrepreneurial, communities to be involved. And I'm not so sure the pathways exist to make that happen. And, we're really curious, with DEF or Tactivate or otherwise, is how do we incentivize, get people excited about national security in general, because we have a tremendous need to get more brain power, development power, in the arena, as it were. And we all know what's happening with our billets. We're unable to fill roles in national security.
Well, I want to get everyone's input on this specific point that you just brought up. So in 2014, my talking point was we need to stay ahead of our near peer adversaries. That was my talking point, right? And then it became we need to stave off the approach of the near peer. And then my talking point became the speed of relevance. Remember that cute little jingle? Everyone had to say speed of relevance everywhere you went. So that was the speed of relevance. And now we've been overtaken. I heard that the other day. We've been surpassed in certain areas. And all along the way, what did you hear? You heard speed of relevance because we need to stay ahead. Hey, we're ahead, but we need to do more to stay ahead of it. Like, you heard that all the way through. And the talking point is distinctly different from when I started doing this kind of stuff. Have we done anything about speed? Are you guys seeing anything at any level, top level, low level, on speed? I'll start with John.
I made a comment in the open about this the other day. I cleared my throat on LinkedIn, kind of went out on a limb. I don't know that there, aside from let's say, set aside the 3-year colorless money that we got to spend almost without reservation during the Iraq-Afghan war, and spend my time in JIDO. I spent those dollars. And then I used the stuff that I bought a year later in Afghanistan, right? So I've played the some new piece of kit came in a box with no invoice, a far forward because it's the newest best thing, and then it ended up in a Connex, right? This is the threat. I've been seeing a bunch of stuff on the Ukraine piece, right? Oh, we've sprayed a bunch of drones all over Ukraine, and now there's 50 different types of drones, because we're just trying to get stuff to the field. So I think that there is never been in the history of DoD more rapid approaches to prototype, test and evaluate, get things into hands of end users. There are more structures, more exercises, more vehicles, more authorities, and let's look at the budget, more money than there's ever been before, right? Just bar none, quantifiably, it's never been as much as it has been before. I think going to expectation management, as one of the folks in the chat mentioned, and having realistic expectations about what it actually takes. If I want to start up a drone company and my aspiration is to get 500 units consumed by the folks in Ukraine, that's relatively straightforward. Just like it was super easy to make anything and put counter ID on it in 2006 and have 5,000 units of those shipped to the Middle East tomorrow. What doesn't happen in that case is that you have a sustainable business that's going to continue to grow and thrive into the future. So let's just be fair about if there's an emergency, we've got 70 different ways to buy stuff quick. If you're a business owner, if you're a prospective startup founder, and you want to make your career, your company's career in GovCon, the little rapid ways get your foot in the door, but we're not going to change JSONs. Stop imagining that pipe dream. It's just never going to come. because it shouldn't, because we still have to buy F-35 Joint Strike Fighters, right? And so I think, like, again, expectation management, like, be realistic about what it is you actually want as a company, take the time it takes to learn what that means, and then actually put together a plan. Stop running around with scissors. You know, I'm innovating, I'm changing the game. Like, yeah, just like everybody else for the past 50 years, like, put a strategy together, use the resources that are there, the free information that's all over
Right.
the place, and have a consistent path, because the assets are there. People just aren't using them well. And it's a bit of a, it's not an easy game to learn.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Let's talk about
Soapbox.
resources. So no, these are great points. Let's talk about resources because a second ago the conversation was about coming in, and I like the example you just gave, John, which is I'm messing around with Sibbers. Oh, now I got a DIU prototype. I'm dancing all around in these little R&D dollars in these innovation groups.
Yep.
But the end game is like major systems, and that's not most companies.
It could be, right? If
It could be.
if that's your goal, that's the answer. If your goal is like, hey, I'm going to make a little bit of money in DoD and then I'm going to go do a commercial thing, like, okay, cool. Like, we're good for that.
I think so as well. I mean, when you look at the SIBR program and you look at some of these prototyping efforts, if a company comes with a different approach and says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to use all of DoD's non-dilutive capital everywhere I can get it. That's how I'm going to entice investors to say, hey, look, I'm going to match your funds over here.
Yep.
DoD is never a guaranteed customer. You have to compete on your own stuff you make in the long run, especially when you get into sustainment. You're always going to be in competition. It's not going to be big margin work. So ultimately, but you can use DoD for non-dilutive capital like nonstop, right? What a great way to use DoD for that. And DoD gets the use out of it, so it's a good deal for them as well. But what free services are out there? If we could talk about for some of the companies here that are on the call, John said there's free services. There are free services. There are tons and tons and tons of free services before you should ever pay anybody a cent to work in this industry. Trish, can you talk a little bit about your office, the kind of stuff that you do with companies?
Sure. So I love this. So I'll make this very quick. I don't know if we're ending at 2, but I want to go really quickly. We have 5 primary programs at the Office of Small Business Programs. I've talked about our cybersecurity initiative, Project Spectrum. We also oversee the revamped PTACs, which are now called Apex Accelerators. We have 98 of those nationwide. That is free advice about everything from getting a DUNS number to contracting and market intelligence. So please hit them up. One that I think is very suitable here is our Mentor Protege program. So again, you know, John, I think you mentioned something about a component of a piece of software into a bigger system. If you don't know how to get from where you've developed that exquisite piece of software to an actual defense contracting, the Mentor Protege program is a really good on-ramp at no cost, where we pair you with a bigger company to teach you the ropes. And we actually are kind of the taskmasters on that to make sure that they're held responsible. For the first time in last fiscal year budget, we have reimbursable on both the mentor and the protege side. So lots of good stuff to unpack there. The Rapid Innovation Fund is a blast from the past. It is now in our office. It's called the RISE, the Rapid Implementation and Scaling Enterprise. So if you've made the invisibility cloak and the Marine Corps wants to order 100,000 of them, but you only have 10, come to us and we'll help you scale there. So, I'm sorry, one of my favorite programs, one that is also the most underutilized, is the Indian Incentive Program. So if you are part of a native community of Alaska, Hawaii, or the continental US, we have special financial incentives and contracting advantages for you. So all of that is available and for free at the Office of Small Business Programs. And I won't tell, but we are going to be debuting something at South by Southwest. So hopefully you'll be there. That will also be an amazing tool to help you see where you are and develop a pathway to where you want to be in terms of defense contract.
So shout out to Macomb Regional PTAC, sorry, Apex Accelerator, stupid new name, sorry. But the folks at Regional PTAC, Macomb, Michigan are the best. Hopefully wherever you are in whatever state or commonwealth you're in, get to know your PTAC folks. I come from a government contracting background. I don't need contracting information from my PTAC people, but the PTAC people talk to the government customers all the time. So they're great sources of intelligence. The other piece is, at least in the state of Michigan and some other states, the PTAC, or sorry, Apex Accelerator will have a partnership with the Small Business Development Corporation for the state. They'll probably be involved with the Economic Development Corporation for your state. So you'll get small business resources along with that as well. Again, that's state to state dependent. But these folks are great. As far as vetting, I see the question on vetting. Use them for what you can get out of them. It's free, right? You get what you pay for. I will tell you, like, they're different. You get different levels of quality depending on which ones that you engage with. That's a people thing. But here in Michigan, we do very well across all of our PTACs, as I am committed to calling them. All right. So with 2 minutes to go, I just want to do parting shots. We got tons of great information out of everybody on here. So let's go over to Jesse. Jesse, parting shots.
Celebrate the tools. As John said, like, if you're in the business of serving the DoD, know the business and have reasonable expectations. And then I would just put out a challenge to everyone. There's a huge amount of capability and capacity out there that is we need to learn how to activate in this country, which falls very much outside of any tool set we have if we want to move at speed and remain competitive.
All right, Trish.
You can unmute yourself. Yep. Hey, the time has come for Amazon.mil, where we find a way to use our technology and our knowledge to bring together products, customers, and financing. Right? So like, imagine your card at Amazon.com. You have a lot of options on how you pay. We owe that to both our warfighters as well as our defense industrial base partners. The time is now, and I would love to develop a way to do that. But until then, we've got some other ways to get you there, and I'm here for it.
I worked on a project called Army-Zon one time for uniforms. That's totally another story. All right, John.
Yeah, starting out. So the one last thing I would put out there, kind of dovetailing on Trish and really on Jesse's points, is whatever you do, whatever you're making, services, products, this is a people game. It is 100% a people game. You can write the best proposal, have the best tech, but if you don't know the customer, if you don't have handshakes with the people who make the decisions, you might as well quit. And 9 times out of 10, you also have to have good relationships with the other companies. And this ecosystem is small, and you'll see how small it is the longer you stay in it. So invest as much or more time in informal and formal relationships with the community. It's generally a pretty welcoming community. Do right by people, they'll do right by you. Maintain your relationships and your reputation, and you'll do well.
Amen to that.
Great points. All right, Raj, I'm passing it back to you.
Awesome. Hey, I wish, I know we always regret the time here. I wish we had at least half hour more. But I think we'll pass on the contact information for each person here as well. So you can feel free to reach out in our follow-up. And just to remind everyone here, just a couple of things. This is a regular series, so please check out our site. You can register. I just posted a link for the next event. We have actually Professor Pandal from UK joining right now, but then we're kicking off this Smashing Barriers to Entry and Commercialization Roundtable series as part of our study that we've been doing for 2 years now. So please feel free to join us. It's an open roundtable, and then we have some other Market Insight series events. So this is going to be a monthly. So with that, thank you so much, everyone, and I really appreciate you taking time to join, and everyone who attended as well. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.